From Elanco, this is Rediscovering the Power of Healthy Animals, the podcast that explores how healthy animals, from cats to cows, can help us overcome some of today's most critical challenges. I'm your host, Michelle Calvo-Lorenzo. You're listening to episode 6, entitled Gather Together, How Animals Bolster Social Connection, Health, and Well-Being. With the holidays around the corner, we wanted to reflect on the idea and importance of togetherness. If you're like my family and I, the holidays are a season when families and friends gather to cook together, share meals, play fun board games, recount cherished memories, and even more specially, make some new ones. It's a season of deeper connection with loved ones, a season of meaningful conversation, of togetherness. So in a world where social isolation is a growing epidemic, these holiday seasons that encourage social gatherings are increasingly important. They allow us to find moments to step away from our devices, shut off our television, get away from our emails and computer screens, and truly just connect. But on most days, if you're like me, I think we can recognize that this is not our reality. Our days are filled with distractions. Work and other responsibilities pull us into silos and put up barriers that can cause anxiety, stress, and loneliness. In previous podcasts, we discussed the impacts of anxiety and loneliness, and you may recall that we shared some eye-opening facts, like the fact that 1 in 5 millennials in America say they're lonely and have no friends. That research has shown that loneliness itself has a detrimental effect that's comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. That's 15 cigarettes per day. Loneliness increases your risk of developing conditions like dementia, high blood pressure, and depression, and nearly 300 million people suffer from anxiety globally. So how do we combat this ever-present challenge? Regardless of whether we have a holiday around the corner or in our everyday lives, how can we overcome that challenge of being more digitally connected than ever, but still more personally isolated than ever before? If you've been tuning in thus far, you can probably guess where I'm going with this important topic of social connection, health, and well-being. Today, we're going to discuss how animals can be a powerful antidote to social isolation, how they help us form unique bonds with other humans, so not just the human-animal bond, but the human-animal-human bond. We'll look at how animals encourage togetherness in families, amongst friends, and within communities, and how they form powerful bonds with us. Bonds that are therapeutic, which vastly improve our mental and emotional well-being. So far on this podcast, I've talked with experts within Elanco, but today I'm excited to start broadening the conversation. In our next few episodes, I'll be joined by industry experts in the fields of veterinary medicine, nutrition, public health, and sustainability to get some fresh perspectives on the importance of animals in our lives. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from Annie Peters, President and CEO of Pet Partners. During her 5 years at Pet Partners, Annie has advocated for educating the public about standards for therapy animal teams and on the underlying research of why animal-assisted interventions work. As a side note, I'm especially excited to connect with Annie because Elanco has been working with Pet Partners for approximately 6 years, and we are strong advocates of the work she and her team do every day. Annie, I'm really excited you're here, and thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
So to start us off, Annie, could you give us some background on Pet Partners, especially for our listeners who aren't familiar with the organization?
I'd love to. Pet Partners is the nation's largest and most prestigious organization registering volunteers and their companion animals to make therapy animal visits. We're a nonprofit organization. We're based in Bellevue, Washington, and we have about 13,000 active teams around the U.S. and in countries, about 13 countries outside of the U.S. as well.
Wow, what a neat organization. So if listeners are like me, Annie, when I hear the phrase animal-assisted therapy or therapy animals, I think about the animals I see on planes or at airports or even at just general locations where you see animals protecting or guiding their owners. So can you talk to us a little bit about those different types of animals and help us focus more on the types of animals or assisted therapy work that you all do at Pet Partners?
That's a great place to start, Michelle, because the confusion is rampant. So animal-assisted interventions is a broad term that talks about how animals and humans interact for the human health and well-being of the human. Within that context, there are different types of working, usually dogs, but not always, working animals that the public generally gets confused on a regular basis. So there are service animals, emotional support animals, and the work that Pet Partners does, which is focused on therapy animals. The easiest way to explain the difference is to talk about the relationship between the animal and the human or humans. A service animal, usually a dog, can also be a mini horse. They have rights covered by the American Disabilities Act in terms of access to public places. And a service animal has a one-to-one relationship. So that dog is serving one person for the benefit of one person. Many of us grew up, the early ones were seeing eye dogs, right? Guide dogs for the blind, hearing assistance dogs. Now a service animal may also alert to a oncoming epileptic seizure, a diabetes alert dog. You may see a large dog wearing a brace that the human is using for stability. So that's a service animal. An emotional support animal is a newer category, and that came along specifically in regards to air travel and housing. So, an emotional support animal in some way comforts, let me back up and say that a service animal has to perform a task. So, that animal does some task for the individual. An emotional support animal provides comfort to someone who has a mental health issue when in a traveling situation like on an airplane, or giving that individual rights to have that emotional support animal with them in housing. So an emotional support animal doesn't have the same public access that a service animal has. It's only this category so that you could keep your pet in housing or when traveling on an airplane. The work that Pet Partners do, and that also is a one-to-one relationship, animal to human. The work that Pet Partners does is therapy animals, and that's a one-to-many. That is you taking your dog, your cat, your mini horse, your bird, your guinea pig, to visit with other people in need, often vulnerable populations, at a time in their life when they may be away from their pets and loved ones.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much for that clarification. So you mentioned a few species on there. I'm curious to hear what kind of registered species you have within your program.
Yeah, so Pet Partners is unique in that we do register multiple species, and we register 9 of them. And now, of course, I'm probably not going to be able to name all 9 off the top of my head. The most common that we have are dogs, right?
Okay.
And within that category of dogs, golden retrievers galore.
Yeah.
They're just born to do this type of work. Labradors, all your doodles, a lot of standard poodles. They're very smart. But then also rescue animals. There are so many rescue animals that are now making a difference in the lives of others as a therapy animal. Next up after the dogs are mini horses.
Okay.
And the mini horses are especially popular in children's hospitals. The kids just go crazy over seeing a mini horse coming in to a facility, when they're at a point in their life when they could probably just really use some cheering up.
Right.
After that are cats. It takes a very special cat to want to get into the car and visit strangers at the retirement community or assisted living. But we do, in fact, have some very wonderful cats that enjoy the work as well. After that, we've got birds, guinea pigs, rabbits, pigs, llamas,
Wow.
and rats. We have some therapy animal rats registered as well.
Look at that. That's really unique, Annie. Very interesting. And I also read about Pet Partners recently in an article in a magazine called Pet Business, where you all launched an animal assisted crisis program to provide support and comfort, again, for those that have been hit by disasters. So can you tell us a little bit more about that program or how Pet Partners works in case some of our listeners are interested in getting involved and reaching out to the community with their pets?
Yes. I'd love to. And that crisis response work is so important. Unfortunately, we're seeing the number of times and reasons and communities where a crisis happens.
Yeah.
And people are looking to the healing power of a therapy animal to help transition back to what may be more of a normal life before the crisis happened. So in order to be eligible for our crisis response program, it starts with being a therapy animal team. So a handler recognizes that they have a potential handler volunteer recognizes that they have a wonderful pet at home
Mm-hmm.
that they would like to share with others, and with the idea that the pet would enjoy it as well, right?
Right.
So that's really core to Pet Partners' philosophy and belief. It's all based on the human animal bond and why we feel better in the presence of our pets. But that human animal bond is a two-way street. These animals are sentient beings. We don't take advantage of them in any way. We don't use them. We involve them. And we want to have some idea that they seem to be enjoying the interaction as well. So if you're at home right now listening and you're looking down at your golden retriever thinking, my dog walks into a room and says, "Where's the party? I'm here. Let's get started." You may have a potential therapy animal on your hands.
Yeah.
So the role that Pet Partners then steps in and plays is we educate you, the handler. So by the time you come to us, you have the animal, you have the pet, and they've had their training. So many of the dogs will have their canine good citizen, or they've got their basic commands. They're reliable and predictable in a social setting. Then we educate you, the handler, about everything that you need to know to make safe and effective visits, how to approach a hospital room, how to exit, things about infectious disease control and disease transmission mitigation, how to advocate for your animal. We have a basic principle called YAYABA. You are your animal's best advocate. And you need to be able to understand and to read your animal signals that they're getting stressed.
Yeah.
And if the animal's getting stressed, it's time to remove them from the situation. Once you've taken all of our education on board, you and your pet are ready to evaluate to see if an objective third-party volunteer evaluator trained by Pet Partners thinks that the two of you would make a good team. So we're not looking for, does that animal never startle? Like animals startle, right? When there's a loud noise in the hospital, humans startle, right?
That's
We
right.
startle.
That's right.
We're looking to see, how does that animal recover in that situation? Do they look up at you and say, "Whoa, what was that?" And you look down and with a reassuring nod say, "I heard it too. It's okay." And they go, "Okay. She says it's okay. It's okay. Let's continue." So we're
Yeah.
looking for that bond between the human and the animal, that team concept. Once you pass your evaluation, you're then registered with Pet Partners, and we provide insurance. So if something happens while you're on a visit, Pet Partners would step in and handle the situation, and it doesn't come back on you in any way. Michelle, our teams make more than 3 million visits a year, and we go many
Wow.
years without any kind of incident at all. It's an incredibly safe and effective intervention, and it's because of our high standards around education and evaluation. We did have a claim maybe 2, 3 years ago, where a dog ate a hearing aid that was on the floor in the nursing home. Hearing aids are
Oh
expensive.
no.
Hearing aids aren't cheap.
That's right.
And the handler was just perplexed. He said, "I don't understand. He always obeys the leave it command."
Yeah.
So that hearing aid must have smelled really good. But Pet Partner stepped in and we replaced the hearing aid so that the handler didn't have any kind of financial obligation in that situation. So then you're ready to start visiting. And it's important that you find a place to visit that works for you and your animal. And you have to be respectful of your animal.
Right.
Some of our teams get started and they really want to visit with kids. They want to go into their local elementary school. They want to do our Read With Me program. They have a passion for serving children in the community. And then they get on that first visit and they realize the animal's not comfortable. They're anxious. There's something about being around children. Children move quickly.
Yeah.
They're erratic, that the animal's stressed out. Then they may find their way to an assisted living facility where that animal just can't wait to put on the vest and go back every week
Yeah.
and visit their new friends.
Yeah.
So you get started visiting based on a facility that works for you and your animal. Once you have a little bit of time under your belt, you're then ready for our crisis response program. But before I launch into that, let me stop and see if you have any questions.
Thanks, Annie. That was a great picture to paint there, and hopefully you've got some listeners that are very interested in going into to considering this program for their potential pets. I've got a boxer, and I think actually after you talk through that, I think she'd be a great candidate. So I'm definitely going to be looking into registering her and myself potentially in this program. But to go back to the heart of this episode, and you've already touched on some of this. I laid out a few stats for our listeners, again, on the climate of loneliness and social isolation society today, but we've also seen that there's a lot of good research that shows that animals do bolster social connection and improve health and well-being. So, for instance, research has shown that interactions with therapy dogs can increase happiness and connection while lowering stress. And pet therapy can also reduce blood pressure and improve overall cardiovascular health. And it also can release those wonderful endorphins that produce that calming effect. So I was curious to hear more about your perspective and learnings from research at Pet Partners in terms of what roles animals play in combating, again, this epidemic of loneliness and social isolation.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's really two topics here. Let's unpack both of them. First, a
Okay.
little bit about therapy animals, and then our own pets, right?
Yeah.
Because you may have listeners right now saying, I've got a wonderful pet at home. They're not suited for therapy animal work, but boy, they're my therapy animal, and don't they provide me comfort and make a difference in my life? So we're invested in helping to build the body of research specific to therapy animal visits. It's challenging research to do well and to do consistently because there's just so many variables. There's the impact and the role that the handler might play. There's the animal, how the animal's feeling on a certain day, the quality of the interaction, the time of the interaction. But there are some wonderful researchers out there at some leading institutions, usually attached to veterinary schools, where they are doing therapy animal research into animal assisted interventions. So they are looking specific at those measures, like you talked about, blood pressure, trying to get at not just the humans, the benefit, but also the stress, maybe in the cortisol in the animal, making sure that the animal isn't stressed on the visit as well. So I've got a rescue dog at home. She's not quite there yet where we are ready to
Yeah.
become a pet partner team, but hope springs eternal.
Yeah.
But she's the most affectionate dog I've ever had.
Aw.
She doesn't want just a belly rub. She wants to look into your eyes. So my little Gidget. So not all animals will hold a gaze, right?
Right.
Some animals will hold a gaze. Some will avert their eyes. It's uncomfortable for them.
Right.
Gidget won't only hold a gaze; she seeks out a gaze.
Oh.
So I know that shot of oxytocin and dopamine that I'm getting when I look into her
Yeah.
eyes, by golly, she's getting it too.
Yeah.
Right? She's looking for it.
Aw.
So when we think about therapy animal research, there's the quality of the intervention, there's the touch, the relaxation that comes with stroking the animal's fur, but then there's also what's going on if there is eye contact that takes place on that visit. The most robust research that we could point to around therapy animal visits and animal assisted interventions is in reading. So it's easier to measure, right? Because we can test a child's pre-reading skills at the beginning of the school year, and then at the end of the school year, and if they've made gains reading to a therapy dog or guinea pig or rabbits. Lots of our species enjoy our reading program, Read With Me.
Yeah.
And what we're finding is that a child that reads to an animal is making greater gains in proficiency than through traditional reading intervention methods.
Wow.
They will read longer. They know that the animal's not judging them, so they're much more likely to try to sound out a word, and that just helps to bolster and progress their reading skills. We also have some birds, and they are brilliant in our reading program. We have a blue and gold macaw named Buddy, and if you saw a video of him, a child reading to him, you'd be convinced, as the child is convinced, that the bird's reading too. The bird, they are so smart. Buddy follows along, looks at the pictures, and then turns around and looks at the child like, okay, come on, turn the page. Let's read the next page. So the research around the reading program is more robust than the other research where we're trying to actually measure what's happening in the body. So now let's try to look at the other side, or the other idea that we talked about is pets at home.
Yeah.
And what do pets do for us? So pets are often referred to as a social lubricant, right?
Yeah.
They're an icebreaker. The idea of walking your dog in your community and getting out there, that's called dog obligation, by the way, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
people who own pets are less sedentary. We're much more likely to be out there walking the dog, whether we feel like it or not, whether it's raining or not, but because we know that the dog needs to be walked. So when you are out in your community and you're walking your dog, you're much more likely to see your neighbors, wave to people, maybe strike up a conversation. Someone stops and pets your dog. It's probably not unusual if you're an active dog walker in your neighborhood
Yeah.
that your neighbors know your dog's name, but they may not know your
Your name.
name, right?
Yes.
Right. So that's part of that social lubricant, and it can also help in terms of reducing the idea of a social isolation that increasingly we seem to be experiencing.
Wow, wow. This is really great, Annie. And talking about those different relationships, maybe you can talk to us a little bit more towards the human animal bond versus that human animal human bond, which is what you all clearly do so well at Pet Partners.
It's been decades now, right, since how we think about pets and animals has changed. There was a time going back now, maybe what, 40, 50 years, where dogs usually, but they lived in the backyard, right?
Yep.
They weren't in the house so often.
Yeah.
Now they're not just in the house; they're in our beds, right?
That's right.
what 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 we spend on them,
Yeah.
the quality of the food that we feed them, making sure they're getting good veterinarian care, that whatever we're trying to do to keep their health, take care of them. That comes from a deep rooted place of caring for that animal and wanting the best for them. And then in return, what do we get? We get that greeting when you come home from work at the end of the day. We get they're always happy to see you. They're not judging, they're forgiving, they're loving. Um, where else can you go and get that kind of uh, constant adoration?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I wish all the people in my life felt about me the way my dog seems to feel about me. My dog loves me, and in return, I love her. We've
Yep.
got a great thing going on.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's a great point. And what I really appreciate what you're sharing with us, Annie, is that this isn't just about the benefits that humans get out of this relationship and this program, but it's also the benefits that the animals get, right? And you touched on some of those points. So I'm interested in hearing if you're able to share a testimony from an individual who saw real change in their health through their interactions with assisted animal therapy, or maybe even their pets who saw some real change or benefits.
We have so many wonderful therapy animal stories. Two particularly come to mind that I'd love to share with your listeners, Michelle.
Yeah.
One is a handler out of Southern California shared this story of she and her standard poodle were visiting in their local hospital, Children's Hospital, and they approached a room and leaned in and said, "Hi, I'm here with a therapy animal. Would you like a visit?" And the young couple that was there said, "Oh my goodness, please come in. Our daughter's in a coma, but she loves dogs. Please come in." So the handler went in and she visited with the mom and dad who needed the visit, as much as anyone, right? Being there with their 10-year-old or 12-year-old daughter that day. So the handler visited for a little while, and then went on their way down the hospital corridor making other visits. And about 10, 15 minutes later, as the handler shared with me, the dad came running through the hospital corridor looking for the handler, saying, "Oh my goodness, I'm so glad I found you. Can you come back to the room? Our daughter woke up and she's asking to see the dog."
Oh.
And they went back to visit with the little girl. And they asked her later, like, "Do you remember anything from the time when you were asleep?" And she said, "I just remember seeing a dog's face and it made me want to giggle."
Oh.
So that dog seemed to have an impact that day on that little girl's health. Um,
Absolutely.
Another one of the wonderful stories is one of our wonderful handlers that visits with the most beautiful dog you could ever imagine. But if you wouldn't recognize the dog, if you saw the pictures before they rescued him,
Oh,
beaten,
yeah.
emaciated, timid, I mean, just scared to death. They rescued this dog, nursed him back to health physically and emotionally, and went on to become a therapy animal team. So, one of the places where they are frequent visitors is at a domestic violence shelter for families. And there was a child there who was there with his mother and siblings, and he just wouldn't talk to the counselors. He wouldn't open up to the counselors at all. So, with the counselor's permission, the handler shared the story of this therapy dog and what he had been through, and about how now he visits children and, looks forward to his visits there at the shelter. And the child reached out, stroked the dog's fur, and said, "It's okay. I've been hurt too."
Oh.
And after that, the child opened up and started talking to the counselor and was willing to share what they had been through. I think your listeners can get a pretty good idea about the magic that happens when these volunteers share their pets with people in need.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that. And what inspiring stories that truly reflect the impact that animals can have on our lives and the lives of our communities. So, Annie, what is your hope for your organization and the health of people around the world?
That's a great question. Well, one of the challenges that we face is that this type of work has become so popular, right? Everyone's hearing about it. You see it on social media. More and more people want to share their pet, and that's great. We are all in favor of that. Um, but it's a little bit more complicated than what people might think at first blush. So there are things that you do need to know as a handler about disease transmission, canine, if you're visiting with a dog, canine body language, your animal's stress signals and calming signals, understanding what's happening. And what we're seeing is that people are just sort of stepping out on their own without an organization like Pet Partners or with another organization that doesn't perhaps uphold the standards that Pet Partners upholds for our therapy animal teams. So my hope is that we can see more and more people sharing their animals, but at the same standards that Pet Partners advocates for both client safety and animal welfare. So we like to say, we hope that you are able to get a visit from a Pet Partner team, but if it's not a Pet Partner team, we hope it's a team that meets the same standards that Pet Partners has.
Wonderful, wonderful, Annie. Well, so before we wrap up, I'd like to ask you our fast 5 questions. And this is a fun little game that we play with all of our podcast interviewees where we ask 5 questions so that our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Okay, you ready to play?
Okay.
All right, so question number 1 is, how would you describe your job to a child in 1 sentence?
I make it possible for people to share their pets with people who need to see them, love them, and cuddle them.
Aw. Number 2, this is going to be hard. What is your favorite animal?
You know what? Right now, I'm going to go with llama
Okay.
because I was speaking at a llama conference last week, and llamas are incredibly smart,
Yeah.
and they learn so fast that they put dogs to shame.
No. Well said. Now I'm interested in looking up llamas. Okay. Number 3, who are your heroes or role models in your industry?
Oh, there are just some wonderful pioneers. I would say probably the most important person to me in this industry is one of our founders, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bill McCulloch. He, along with Bill was a veterinarian. His brother Michael was a psychiatrist, and Dr. Leo Bustad, another veterinarian. The 3 of them came together in the late 70s and founded Pet Partners. It was then Delta Society. Leo and Michael have passed, but Bill's still living. He's 87 and living in Portland. And if it weren't for Bill, Leo, and Michael, I'm not even sure we would have this field of animal-assisted interventions that we cherish today.
Wow, great story. So number 4, Annie, what podcast or book would you recommend?
So if you want to get more into the science around animal-assisted interventions, if you're listening to this and you're a scientist or a researcher, you want to know more about why this works, I would recommend the Handbook on Animal-Assisted Therapy, edited by Dr. Aubrey Fine. If you want to know more about volunteering with your pet, I would recommend the preeminent publication known as the Pet Partners Handler Guide. And you can find that and how to get started with Pet Partners at www.petpartners.org. I had to get that plug in.
There it is. That's okay. We'll take it. And last question, Annie, what is today's greatest challenge that animals can positively impact?
What we hear about constantly is screen time, right? Screen time on our phones and on our iPads and our devices, and how we are so isolated from others because we're looking down at our phones. And if we could put our phones down, spend time with animals, whether it's your own pet, whether it's out in nature, at a hike, in a farm, wherever we have a chance to interact with animals, they do bring something tremendous of value to our lives and us to them in return. And what more could you ask for than spending time with a loving animal and, just getting away from the technology and getting back to nature?
Oh, well stated. I know that for folks like me who love people, but who also really love animals, we can really resonate with that. So Thank you, Annie. And I'd like to just give you another couple seconds in case you have any closing remarks or thoughts you'd like to leave for our listeners.
Sure. How's this? If you're sitting there wondering, well, I'm not sure if my pet would be a good therapy animal, you can go to our website, petpartners.org, and there's a fun little quiz you can take.
Ah,
And it asks you 7 or 8 questions. And at the end, it will tell you whether or not you may have a potential therapy animal living in your home or whether your pet may enjoy some other activity like agility work.
great, great. There's a lot of options, right? There's options out there for everyone.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for your time, Annie. I hope we have you back soon again to hear more about the incredible work you all are doing at Pet Partners.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
As we head into the holiday season, I hope you feel encouraged to seek meaningful connections with those around you. Find a moment to disconnect from your daily worries, take your pet on a long walk, and invite a friend or neighbor to join you. How about visiting a local dog park or volunteering at an animal shelter? Or maybe explore ways to get involved with therapy programs like that at Pet Partners. Either way, encourage yourself to gather together with your loved ones over a casual dinner, or maybe just take time to love on your pet a bit more this week. The benefits are powerful. Thanks for listening. If you want to explore more and rediscover the power of healthy animals, visit elanco.com/rediscover and be sure to tune in to next month's episode.